Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be filming a try a chapter video. I'm going to read the first chapters of 5 different historical mystery books. I have been really into reading historical mysteries in the past year and a half, and I was hoping that this video would help me decide another series to start. I picked a few out from my TBR, ones that I saw people on YouTube recommend, and I'm going to pick one to read this month. So first, the only one of these books that I own physically, I'm going to read the first chapter of Dissolution by C.J. Sansom, which is the first in the Shard Lake series. This is a historical mystery series that takes place in the Tudor times. The main character, Matthew Shardlake, is a lawyer. This first book takes place during the reign of King Henry VIII, around the time of the dissolution of the monasteries in England, and the main character is asked by Thomas Cromwell to go to this monastery where one of Cromwell's agents has been murdered. When I studied abroad in England a few years ago, I saw one of the books in this series at a British bookstore, and I was really intrigued by the concept because I love mysteries and I really love the Tudor era. I think it also would be really interesting to see how someone would go about solving a crime in this time period. So, what other books am I going to try in this video? First of all, I think I definitely need to try The Anatomist's Wife, which is the first of the Lady Darby mysteries by Anna Lee Huber. Once I started getting into historical mysteries, I watched a bunch of YouTube videos where people recommended their favorite historical mystery books, and this series came up a lot, several times, which is why I added it to my TBR. This series takes place in the early to mid-Victorian era. I don't know exactly what year it starts, and the main character is Lady Kira Darby. She is a widow. Her husband has recently died, and her husband's interest in anatomy and death resulted in him being seen as very strange by society. It just wasn't considered a very normal hobby. The premise of the first book in the series is that Lady Kira is at her sister's estate where her sister lives with her husband, and a murder takes place during a house party at this estate in Scotland. So Lady Kira begins solving the murder with the help of Sebastian Gage, who she initially does not like very much, but I suspect that he's going to become her love interest throughout the series. I think he is supposed to be an inquiry agent, which is basically an antiquated term for a private detective. You hire a private detective to look into inquiries for you, inquiry agent. So I'm also going to read the first chapter of A Beautiful Blue Death, which is the first of the Charles Lennox mysteries. This is another series set in the Victorian era. I'm not sure exactly what year, it didn't say in the plot description. I actually first learned about this series because my mother went to the library and just picked up a random book that she thought looked interesting, and it was like the 13th book in this series, and I started reading the description in the dust jacket when she came home with it. And I thought to myself, this does not sound like it's the first book of the series, and I looked it up on Goodreads and basically told her she had unknowingly picked up like the 13th book in a series. So she didn't end up reading it, but you know, with my personal reading taste, when I saw Victorian murder mystery, 13 books, I was like, hey, this might be something I want to read because if I like it, there's like 13 books for me to read. The main character, Charles Lennox, fits into that gentleman sleuth archetype where he is a man of means, seems to have come from some sort of wealthy background, and he's not a professional policeman, but he has an aptitude for solving crimes. In this first book, the basic plot is that you can hear the garbage disposal in the background, I'm sorry. His lifelong friend, Lady Jane, tells him that a former servant of hers has been found dead and the police think it's a suicide, but Lennox begins to suspect that it was actually murder by an extremely rare poison. Then I'm also going to read the first chapter of And Only to Deceive, which is the first of the Lady Emily mysteries by Tasha Alexander. Okay, that's what I thought her name was, but I just wanted to check. And this is set in either the Georgian era or the early Victorian era. Again, I can't pinpoint exactly when all these books are set because the plot descriptions do not say what specific year it is. But sometime in the 1800s in England, the main character, Lady Emily, is a widow. She married a viscount who died not long after their marriage. Lady Emily, it seems, married her late husband out of convenience, but in the plot of this book, she begins to discover that her husband actually deeply loved her, and so she starts trying to learn more about her late husband, who was very interested in Greco-Roman antiquities. I couldn't say that word for a second. And she then discovers a dangerous secret involving stolen artifacts from the Greco-Roman galleries. And she's also juggling two suitors who are now trying to snatch her up in her widowhood. The plot description doesn't mention anything about a murder, so now I'm even wondering, will this book actually have a murder in it? Or is it more so about theft, some kind of conspiracy? I don't know. This is the first in a series of books that has 16 books in it, so again, if I like it, there's a lot to read here. And finally, I'm also going to read the first chapter of Crocodile on the Sandbank. This is another series I've heard a lot of good things about. The first book was actually published back in the 1970s, and there are many books in this series, but I've heard that it's an amazing historical mystery series, and I've been watching writing-related YouTube videos, and this series was specifically mentioned as being a great example of the genre. This series takes place in the 1880s, so the late Victorian era, and Amelia Peabody is traveling to Egypt after the death of her father. While she is on her way to Egypt, she meets Evelyn, who is a young English woman that has just been abandoned by her lover. So Amelia decides to enlist Evelyn as a companion. They sail down the Nile to an archaeological dig headed by the Emerson brothers. But while they're in Egypt, strange things begin happening, and Amelia suspects that someone is trying to kill Evelyn. So those are the books I'm going to be trying in this vlog, and once I have read all of the first chapters, I will give my thoughts on each one. Then at the end, I'm going to try to decide which book I want to read this month. Alright, I'm back. So I don't remember exactly what order I mentioned all the books to begin with, so I'm just gonna share my thoughts as they come to me. First, I read the first chapter of Dissolution, which I liked. It was not a standout first chapter, but there were no red flags or anything. Like, it was a fine first chapter. Basically, the first chapter is just the main character going to a meeting with Thomas Cromwell, and Thomas Cromwell starts talking to him about the monarchy's efforts to dissolve the monasteries in England. So what Cromwell tells Shardlake is basically that he is strong-arming some of the monasteries into closing their doors because he has information he could expose on the monastery's activities. Some of them have been engaging in illicit dealings, so he's basically straight up blackmailing them, and he sent one of his men, this man named Robin Singleton, to one of the monasteries to basically carry out Cromwell's plans. However, he's received a note saying that Singleton has been brutally murdered, so he needs Shardlake to go and investigate. So all in all, a fine first chapter, basically laying the groundwork for things to come. We also find out that Shardlake is physically disabled and he has a hunchback, which is something that I did not know about the character going into the book. So that's the first one. Now, then I read the first chapter of The Anatomist's Wife, and let me tell you, I really did not enjoy this first chapter at all. I didn't think it was really a good place to start. The book literally begins with the discovery of the body of, I think her name is Lady Godwin. All these characters are at the house of Lady Darby's sister and brother-in-law, and Lady Godwin, one of the guests, is found murdered in the hedge maze, which it sounds like it should be a very exciting way to start a book. However, I don't think it worked, because if you just jump straight to the murder without introducing anyone, how am I, as the reader, supposed to feel emotionally invested? Because none of these people mean anything to me. All these names are getting thrown out. I don't know who any of these people are. I don't know anything about Lady Keira Darby at this point, our heroine. So how am I supposed to be invested in this murder and her attempts to investigate it when I don't know who any of these characters are, and I could not tell you a damn thing about any of them? Honestly, when I started reading this, at first I was wondering if it was a mistake. Was this really the first chapter? But it said chapter 1. Yeah, I didn't think this was a good way to start the book at all, really. Is that harsh? But yeah, I did not think from a writing standpoint it made sense. Like, yeah, in theory, it sounds like an exciting way to start, but I think you need to ease into it just slightly more so your reader actually knows who the characters are and cares about what's going on. I'm definitely not choosing to read that book this month. I did not like the beginning, and I guess I may as well just talk about the other one that I know I'm not choosing. I did not think the beginning was terrible, it just didn't really grab me. And Only to Deceive, the first of the Lady Emily mysteries. I thought this opening wasn't actively bad, but it kind of felt like a bit of an info dump and was not as engaging as some of the others. We basically begin with Lady Emily talking about why she decided to marry her husband. I believe her late husband's name was Philip the Viscount Ashton, and we find out that Emily basically agreed to marry him in order to escape her overbearing mother. Her mother is very hard on her, always commenting about her appearance, her need to stay young and thin, etc. And so Emily accepted this proposal because she felt like this was her way out. Philip was very interested in antiquities, like I said, and also very into hunting. He would go on many hunting trips to various African countries with his friends. And when he died 6 months after the marriage, the two of them really hadn't spent that much time together. Emily is now in mourning, though she never really loved her husband to begin with. It's just what's socially expected of her. And she receives a visit from one of her late husband's friends, whose name is Colin Hargreaves. And Hargreaves tells her that Philip has willed to her a villa in Greece that she did not even know he owned. And she finds out from Hargreaves that he used to refer to her as Callista, which means beautiful in Greek, showing a hint that he did have real affection for her. She starts going through Philip's stuff, and she discovers in one of his books about the British Museum a note written in the book, and I don't remember word for word what it said, but it was a threat of some sort of alluding that Philip was involved in something he shouldn't be involved with, and the person was low-key threatening to harm or kill him if he continued to pursue whatever mysterious business he was looking into. I did mention when I was reading the plot description that I didn't know if this book was actually going to have a murder or not, but now after this first chapter, I'm wondering if Emily's husband's death is actually suspicious, if perhaps he was looking into this dangerous secret at the British Museum and that resulted in his potential murder. So that was basically all the main points of the first chapter. I didn't think it was bad, but we were getting just paragraphs of Emily explaining how she got to this point. So I think I would have liked a little bit more action. I think that would have made the first chapter more engaging. And I do feel like I at least learned some more about Emily in this chapter. Another thing about why I disliked the first chapter of The Anatomist's Wife so much is that first chapter was so short. So yeah, it did have action, which is what I said I wanted from the Lady Emily chapter more, but it was so short, so quick, and I don't feel like I really learned anything about any of the characters from that first chapter, and that's kind of what I think is the problem, because you need in the first chapter to make the reader invested in your character, and I did not feel that way at all after reading that first chapter. I just didn't really care. So, by process of elimination, the two books that I'm kind of torn between are A Beautiful Blue Death and Crocodile on the Sandbank. I did like both of these first chapters. I think the first chapter of A Beautiful Blue Death was really kind of just setting up the plot, but I don't know exactly why. I just liked the way this one was written. So while this chapter was fairly brief and not a lot has happened so far, I enjoyed the writing style, and I think it had a nice mix of setting up the plot and setting up the characters. We meet the main character, Charles Lennox, who, like I said, is a gentleman sleuth. He comes from a wealthy background and lives in Mayfair. I don't know if it mentioned exactly where his family's money comes from. I'm not sure if he has noble origins or not. It does mention that he has a brother, so perhaps his family is titled and the brother is the heir to the title instead of him. But in this first chapter, we learn that he has some degree of a relationship with Scotland Yard because it references him helping this character named Inspector Exeter with a recent case, and Lennox was able to decipher the real culprit, whereas the inspector was not. He refers to the inspector as lacking imagination, and this is really the kind of sleuth detective dynamic that you see in stories like Sherlock Holmes. It gave me that sort of vibe. He decides to visit the house of his lifelong friend, Lady Jane, because Lady Jane has sent him a note asking him to come over at once because something has happened. We find out that Lady Jane has been a close friend of his since they were children. They grew up near each other, and at one point Lennox's brother was actually in love with Lady Jane. I don't know, is Lady Jane going to become his love interest in the course of this series? I'm kind of assuming that just because, you know, usually these historical mystery series have a sleuth and a love interest. So while a lot did not happen in this first chapter, I feel like it had a good mix of introducing the characters and setting up the murder mystery plot, and I think I liked the writing itself a little better than some of the others. Finally, Crocodile on the Sandbank. This one had a really long first chapter, and to be honest, I don't think I was even able to read the entire first chapter in the free preview. I kind of cut off, I think, in the middle of a sentence. But I will tell you about what I was able to read. Our main character is Amelia Peabody. She is an independent spinster of means, aged 32. Her father has recently died and left her a large sum of money, and so she is setting out to see the world. She is currently in Rome, and she did hire a lady companion to travel with her. However, the companion fell sick and had to go back to England. While walking around in Rome, she encounters a young English woman who has fainted on the street, and she helps her. This young woman is named Evelyn, and she is the granddaughter, I believe, of the Earl of Ellesmere. That title stuck out to me because there's also a Earl of Ellesmere in the Outlander series, spelled exactly the same way too. I don't know, maybe Diana Gabaldon has read these books. Evelyn has been disowned by her dying grandfather because she eloped with an Italian man named Alberto, but as soon as she was written out of the will, Alberto abandoned her, leaving her reputation in tatters. But Amelia, being an independent-minded and unconventional Victorian woman, does not have a problem with that and asks Evelyn to become her new lady companion, which Evelyn immediately accepts. This first chapter kind of reminded me of the Veronica Speedwell mysteries by Deanna Raybourn, which I have been reading and really enjoy. It has the same sort of witty tone and independent-minded female lead as that series. My one fear about this first book is I'm worried we might range into a little bit of not like the other girls territory with Amelia Peabody. We already had her complaining about the impracticalities of Victorian women's clothes and talking about how marriage might be fine for other women, but she's not interested. There's nothing wrong with being like other women. You know, don't put down other women to make your main female character seem cool. I'm not saying that's what this book is going to do, but it just gave me a whiff of those vibes. Also, one of my biggest pet peeves is when in historical fiction, books, movies, or whatever, they spend a lot of time complaining about corsets and how uncomfortable corsets are, because actually in the past, corsets were not as restrictive as people nowadays believe them to be. They were meant to be comfortable, and the reason why a lot of actresses on sets complain about them is because the costume department is not putting them in the corsets properly. You're supposed to have a shift under your corset so it doesn't rub against your skin, but a lot of the movies just don't do that. And that's my rant on corsets for the day. I really liked the tone of this one. I am a little bit apprehensive, but I do think it could end up being really fun. And while it did not absolutely knock my socks off, I thought A Beautiful Blue Death had a decent start and I enjoyed the writing so far. It's kind of a toss-up. I don't know which one of these two I should pick. Now I looked at Goodreads and I'm still conflicted. Crocodile on the Sandbank has a much higher Goodreads rating. It has an average rating of 4 stars, whereas A Beautiful Blue Death has an average rating of 3.64 stars, which is not nearly as high, but looking at how my friends have reviewed these books, I had a friend who rated Crocodile on the Sandbank 3 stars, and a friend who rated A Beautiful Blue Death, I can't talk today, 4 stars. So my friends actually liked that one better. I still haven't made up my mind. You know, I think based on what I'm in the mood for right now, I'm going to go with A Beautiful Blue Death, the first of the Charles Lennox mysteries. So there you go. I made a decision. We'll see if I enjoy the book. I definitely would still like to try Amelia Peabody. I don't know if I'm entirely feeling it this month, but definitely a series I have my eye on. And I don't know if I even want to read The Anatomist's Wife anymore. Yeah, if any of you out there have read it, is it good? I just really did not like the writing of the first chapter at all. I don't know. I wasn't really vibing with it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've read any of these books that I mentioned, do let me know in the comment section. I would love to hear your thoughts about them. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. My social media links are down below if you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, or be my friend on Goodreads. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a memorable rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you next time.